Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, real talk. Do you think that Logan Paul, James Deacon, and all these random rich celebrities should be talking about global news of developing stories for anything under the sun? Maybe, but let's just examine what happens when that carries out. Because this debate is more than just free speech. This debate is more than just far-flung people in different areas sharing their opinion. This debate is specifically about the rise of these journalists who, by the way, are not trained journalists. They just so happen to be rich, famous, and famous for something else. That something else is in many instances, guess what? Not about news reporting, but about being a technocrat, being pretty, or being handsome in doing something else. These particular things, in and of itself, show the harm of their side. Because their side can be motivated to say, more is better, decentralization is beautiful, traditional media sucks ass. But we need to understand that contrary to popular belief, things can get worse. They might assume and call us and say, oh, you're running a negative case. They can do it well. But we told you coming from the top of our speeches that even if these things are done well, they don't have a complete story. They aren't proximate. They aren't there. And coming from my speech, I told you that they don't have the government connections and accountability incentive to literally be able to make change towards what they want to do. And what Sarv and Matthew mentioned, in instances where bad things happen, to what extent will they be accountable? They'll just be like, yeah, sorry, insert post to genuflect to their mistake. But compared to the rise of traditional media or the defense of status quo, as what we already told you, this exists in a spectrum. And newsflash, it's not like on our side of the house, these content creators and influencers will exist. This isn't going to be some authoritarian dictatorship. We're simply saying we don't think that this rise is particularly necessary because of that harm. And that harm is something that their side dismisses in the attempt to be able to dunk on traditional news agencies. Look, bro, traditional news agencies are also not that great. They can have problems, but at least there are a lot of them. At least there's an ability to be able to cancel and call them out, as opposed to all these other random guys of which there isn't any necessarily delta to be able to hold them accountable. So here's the winning metric. In instances where bad things happen on their side, there are just so many, so difficult to be able to have to deal with it. That's why my POI to the whip was round winning, because a lot of the problems they accuse our case of can be solved with, guess what? These people not necessarily being in that position to begin with. The position of risk, the position of them using their capacity, weaponizing, by the way, the algorithm and the nature of how people absorb these things to potentially put these particular people in a bad light. We told you a very important sense of quality, especially for developing stories where it's uncertain. These people use narratives of confirmation bias and their own experience to potentially put a flavor and radicalize those things so it seems cool and they seem bold and firm in terms of the stance they're taking. But in and of itself, when those things are done, can lead to a host of harm. Not just misinformation, and you got this from my partners. Analysis paralysis. On their side, yay, decentralization, so many. But what do I do now? What do I believe in? What if these things start conflicting each other? That is the risk, that is the harm when you have the rise of this, when you let your guard down, lower the barriers of this, and allow anyone to become a journalist just because they're cute, handsome, and sexy. For all these reasons, proud to take it from Side Pro. Thank you.